everyone, it's Elise from Kit and Clowder, and today I'm going to be sharing with you techniques for colouring trees, branches and cut wood. I'll be showing you a few different techniques and images today, and the first one that I'm going to be showing you is this simple branch on the beautiful Tenderhearted Image by Tiddlyinks. So generally when I'm colouring timber, the main colours that I go for are in my E family. So I've got my E11, E13, E15 and E18. Before we get started, I'm also trying a new camera angle today on my videos. I've got a new tripod set up. So let me know what you think and if it's working or not, and we'll see how we go with it. Okay. So as always, for my first step, I'm going to grab my E11. And this is my lightest marker that I'm using in this combo. And the reason that I've grabbed this one is because I always like to map out where my shading is going to go before I get too far down the track. And that way, because you're doing it with your lightest colour, if you don't like how it's turning out, you can just go ahead and go over it or change it out with your darker colours. So I'm going to do, my light source today is going to be coming from this direction, my top left. And I'm really, with this branch here, I'm just going to treat it the same way I'd basically treat my pleats. So you can see that we've got, the artist Crafty has already drawn in these guidelines, and always use the guides that the artist has drawn in to help you out with the decision of where to put your lines. But I'm just going to use those as a guide. And I'm basically just going to follow them through as if I was doing pleats on a dress. So this technique is quite different from like the cut timber that you'd see in furniture or in fences. We're just trying to create a really nice texture on the branch. And it might not be 100% realistic, but it's all about creating that nice texture. So I'm doing a lot of shading along this bottom part here, because that bottom section would be receiving the least amount of light, so it is going to be the darkest. I'm adding in a few lines of my own as well to give it a really nice gnarly sort of effect. I don't want it to look regular. Don't forget to do a little bit of a cast shadow underneath her leg there. Okay, so now I'm happy with that. I'm going to go in with my darkest marker, which is my E18. And I'm basically just going to do the same thing. I'm going to go over where I want all the darkest shadows to be. Again, the same way that I do my pleats. And you know, this is just a really simple technique, and it's a great image to practice on, because if you sort of get it down pat on these smaller images, you can apply it to any image. And you'll see I've actually done another colouring as well of a much more complex image by Make It Crafty. And I'm just going to do that in a speed video at the end of this tutorial, so you can see I've used exactly the same technique, but on a much more complex and bigger area, you still get a really lovely effect. This is probably easier if I turn the image around as well. If you're flicking away from yourself, it's going to be easier. And don't forget, with the light source coming from this top left, let's just flick it back around to explain. So my light source is coming from here. So it's the same way with pleats. You can see I've got the E11, and you can see just there to the right side of it, I've done my E18, so my darkest colour. That's because it'll go from light to dark. Light closest to the light source and down to dark. So that's what's going to give you that gradient and that shadowing in the right direction. extending my cast shadow underneath her leg. You don't have to be too neat with it either. I think it's nice to just have a little bit of irregularity because the tree is never really symmetrical. So don't be too precise where you're going to put them. Now this is my E15, and so keeping with what I said before about the light source, I'm going to place the colour over the top of the E18 and then blending it out towards my E11. Don't worry if you cover up the E11, that was sort of more of a guide as well. This is quite a small image, so it's a lot harder to figure out where to put all the highlights. So you do have to be careful that you don't go in too dark and don't leave yourself any room to do the highlights. And that can be one of the dangers of doing dark to light colouring. So if you're still new to doing Copic colouring, you can always just do, instead of jumping up from the E11 to the E18, you can just work your way from the E11 up through to E13, E15 and then E18 to know that you've left yourself enough room. Go in and do the nest as well. Now you probably don't need to do the E13. The main reason that I do like to use it, it's got a really nice tone about it. So it just adds just a little bit more depth and dimension. And I find that whenever I think, oh, I don't really need it, I'm not going to put it in, you sort of miss it. So it is nice to add it. So you can see you're getting a really nice texture through here now. So rather than just colouring it in and having just a one colour or really one-dimensional branch, you're creating a really nice texture. So it's just adding another sense of depth to your images, which I get a lot of questions about. It's just how to take it to that next step and get really nice depth and dimension. So although this might not be the most, sorry, this is my E11 as well. I'm going over the top just really quickly. So although this might not be the most correct way of doing a branch because it might not look the most realistic, it's probably going to give you the most depth to play with. So if you do have a more basic image, and I mean this image is lovely, she's got such lovely hair and details, but if you've got one that is really basic, just adding a little detail like this branch is going to really pep it up a bit. Now I've done my first layer of colour from dark to light. I'm now going to go back in and just add a little bit more depth. So this is my E18 and I'm basically just going back over the top of where I had those shadows. I'm just darkening up the colour. And I always do like to do the two colours, the two layers of colour, because it really adds a lot more depth. And you probably can't really tell from the video, but once it's all coloured up, it makes such a big difference to do your two layers. Now my E15. my E13. And now my E11. I'm a bit less precise with my E11. I don't really want to colour it in. I really like these areas that are still a lot lighter. So it's really just about doing a quick sort of blend on top. And that's it, that's the branch all done. So as I said before, at the end of the video, I've done a more complex branch that you can apply the exact same technique to, so you can see how that's carried across. You can use it for trees, branches, anything you like really. The next technique, I've just, not really using an image for this one, I've just got a rectangle basically drawn on a scrap piece of paper, but I wanted to show you how I would colour up say timber palings on a fence. So I've got a few magnolia stamps and even some La La Land craft stamps that are fences or stools, so little chairs, might be sitting on a wooden bench or something like that. And I'm going to be using the same colours, so my E11, 13, 15 and 18, but I want more sort of like a processed cut timber look. And this is something that I learnt in my design degree as well. So basically it's quite squiggly. I want it to look more natural. We just start off and I'm just sort of mapping in to see where I want the colour. So you're always going to have squiggly lines, they're not going to be straight. So I'm just sort of using the tip of my marker. You're going to have knots in the wood as well, so I might just drawing a little knot there. And you'll have like these triangular bits or these bits that run off on the side, and it kind of follows its own sort of pattern. So I mean we've sort of created this gap here, so then you want something to come in there. So you're just basically filling up the space. Use triangles, just lines, and put in a couple of knots. That's basically my basic outline of what I'm trying to do. I'm going to grab now my E18. Let's say our light source is coming from this top left as well. So same thing, same idea with the pleats. We basically want to go to the right hand side, so the opposite side of where the light source is. And we just want to draw these in. And I'm being a little bit, not trying to do a really hard line. This is sort of like a sketchy line. And when it's all finished, you'll see it just adds another texture to it basically. Okay, now I'm going to grab my E15 and I'm going over the top of the E18 and sort of blending it out. Now grabbing my E13 again doing a really rough sort of blending. And now my E11. So this is a much larger scale than most of your stamps will be. I've just drawn it a lot bigger so you can sort of see what it looks like at a larger scale. But you can just scale it down to whatever suits, or you might have less lines if it's quite a small image, or just sort of practice and see what works best for what you're actually working on at the time. Okay, so that's my first layer done. So now I'm going to go back in. I've got my E18. I'll put up an example at the end as well. I've coloured in recently a Crafty Sentiments stamp that had a fence in it, and I've used this technique on that as well. My E13. And now blending it all out with my E11. So my markers are a little dirty, so you're getting a little bit of texture in there from that as well. So that's basically the idea of what you're trying to achieve. I think I've got my my Crafty Sentiments card here as well, so I'll just pull that out so you can see an example of it on an actual stamp. Okay, so I found two cards that show the techniques. So first I've got my Crafty Sentiments. So this one here is probably a lot more natural than what not more natural, it's probably a lot more structured than what I've just shown you. So it's quite a small image, and you can see that I've used really fine strokes to achieve the grain. On my Tiddlyinks card that I found, so this one here, you can see I've used the same technique that I've just shown you on the tree. So you've got all the little knots there, and it's sort of, you've got these lines that are following it through. So you basically have the same technique as the one I showed you here, actually on this card. So you can apply this technique to a tree if you like, rather than the last technique. It gives you that more gnarly, more natural look. So it just depends what you're looking for. These are just a couple of techniques that I found work for me, and are generally what I apply to my images. So I hope that's helped out. Don't forget I'll put another speed colouring sample of how I've coloured the more detailed branch and depth. And if you've got any questions at all, please just let me know. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.